No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
All right, folks, welcome back. It's episode 22, and to be honest, there are so many changes this week to the format and topics and who we thought we were going to have on and stuff that it's practically impossible for me to keep up, but I think we're going to work it out, and we got some good stuff coming up for you, including we're joined by Whiskey this week. He's going to give us a rundown and a great video on some Battleship stuff. Spectre brought his cat. We are not joined by Crazy Cole this week. He's having some personal issues, so we'll try and get him back next week. This is also the very first week we've decided to also do a live cast every Sunday night, as it is right now at 10 Central Time. So we're going to see how that goes out. We'll make this video available on the YouTube channel. So hope you guys enjoy it, and let's get to it. So first of all, Spectre, welcome back. Great to see your disinterested face as always.
Thank you.
And welcome, Whiskey. Glad to have you on. Thanks for doing that stuff for us on short notice.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me.
I hope you guys have your apple juice or whatever it is you're drinking tonight.
No apple juice from me, no thank you.
Man,
Dr. Pepper here.
I don't trust a man who doesn't drink apple juice or coffee.
Don't need a drink to bring up my enthusiasms.
You're what? You're enthusiasts? All right, fair enough.
Enthusiasms.
All right, so we were going to have a little bit of a Battleship hefty kind of thing going on this week. So as you can see, I got the Colorado up this week. It should be an interesting talk to find out why I dislike trying to play low-tier US battleships. I kind of find it obnoxious, actually, the speed. Also, let's start with, of course, it's Christmas time, right, Spectre? So let's talk about...
it's December.
Let's talk about Shipmas versus Shipsgiving for a second. And I know people are probably done talking about it, but I don't know. What was your initial take before I start in here?
My initial take was confusion. Where were these individual ship sales in the Thanksgiving sale?
Okay, so you took the same thing away from it I did, and what I got pulled up here for you is let's take a look. Here it is, the Low Yang, $33.99 individual, just a port slot and a Low Yang. And then the other bundle you could have gotten it in was part of the what, the Bliskovica. Oh, the Sko will probably yell at me for the way I said that. The Dunkirk and the Anshan. And so I kind of did a little math. And you remember the breakdown we had of the what people thought the $400 bundle doubloon-wise was? You recall that one?
I recall you had like a whole spreadsheet or something laid
Oh,
out.
I did not. There was certainly a forum post that had it, but I think they had the Low Yang in there at about 8,000 doubloons, so that works out to about $35. So pretty good deal. At least they kept the price point the same, from what I can tell, if the other calculation stuff was right. But let's see, what else was there? I actually think I have that forum post up for you. But I guess the real rub is I haven't seen any posts yet that show discontent with, hey, I bought a few of these ships as part of the bundle, but I got some that I didn't want, and now we're going to be getting them kind of separately this month, right?
I mean, if you got them as part of the bundle, I think you, for the most part, got like a better deal, right?
No,
because you got the package overall. Like, if you're just interested in ships, you got a discount from the overall package, and any ships that you already had, you got full doubloon value out of. Like, I don't know why anyone would complain about it.
Well, I think I guess it comes down to did you want all those doubloons or not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Scharnhorst, I think 95 or 10,000 doubloons, 9,500 or something like that was about what they thought they were going to go with, or what the breakdown was in the old package, and that's about $40. So, I mean, again, price is about right. Would have been nice to buy it individually for those who didn't have it.
Well, that's just how it broke down.
All right, no sympathy. I guess you're not feeling me on that one. How about you, Whiskey? Did you buy any of the ship's giving packages?
No, I didn't. Didn't really feel like buying any of them, and didn't have the money for the big one. Although that would have probably been the one I would have gotten just for the doubloons.
So, all right. Well, I didn't see any of the other ones that I really wanted to, and here's the old list of kind of what the breakdown was, the estimated breakdown, and it's not terribly interesting, I guess, anymore. So we'll let it go. I'm not really feeling that passionate about now that I'm thinking about it, so we'll let that one ride. So what about the ARP mission stuff now that you can do the really easy ARP one for all of those? Because I remember a few times we had some pretty painful missions we were trying to finish.
I mean, I do recall like some of the earlier ARP missions had the problem where like they wanted you to like get secure kills and like set fires, and that sort of drove us to play ships in ways that we normally wouldn't have played. But I mean, I feel like a couple months ago, a leak or something came up, and like, yeah, Wargaming came out and just basically said, yeah, if you missed out on any of the old ARP ships, we would have one final mission for you to come and pick up all these ships that you may have missed. As for me personally, like, I mean, I'm pretty sure after I got my first Congo clone, my first Miyoko clone, like, I just said, whatever. I don't recall going way out of my way to try to secure these other ships. So
I remember
I guess
you
it
just
doesn't
blocked
matter
it
to
out.
me.
You blocked it out because I remember
may
one
have
night there
blocked-
was like that tier 5 mission, and we spent like, I don't know, 3 hours essentially blacking out on the
like we
pavement.
did that like I feel like we only did that like once, and then after that, because like from like there was like two like back-to-back ARP months where the missions were split, right? Like you could get one ship by playing higher tier ships and one ship from playing low tier ships. And I'm pretty sure for both of those months, I totally ignored like the low tier mission. I was like, screw it, I don't care. I don't need like yet another Congo clone, so I didn't do them. And now I'm being rewarded for my disregard, because I am now getting these ships just for playing the game, because this new mission rewards you the ships based on experience earned.
Yeah, but
Well-
did that really change anything? Because honestly, I don't think I've ever once paid attention to any of the ARP missions, and I've still gotten almost all of them. So I don't really see that that's really changed much. It's not that I play the game a whole lot.
It's
you guys
true.
both have more battles than I do.
It's true, but like, like for me, like I like playing higher tier ships, right? Like, this about me. Like it's tier 7 and above or bust. And so for me at least, like I would never earn the ships that you would have played like a tier 5 and below missions to get. So I mean, ultimately, like if you were the kind of player who was like well-rounded, who you played the tiers up and down, between tier 2 and tier 10, you play them all. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You probably had them anyways, just from playing the game. But for players like me, where I guess you can call me a bit of like a high tier snob. I mean, this is just a great way to round out like the port.
Well, I did notice, I don't know if you did when you logged in either today or maybe it was yesterday, that a few of my captains on those changed, right? So I had them all, but then they got replaced with 10-point captains where they didn't come with that before. And it only happened on the ones where I hadn't already allocated points. So I don't know. Maybe it was just me. Maybe something happened that I didn't notice. Or maybe it's my imagination, right? I don't know. We'll ask Boots.
He might not have a very satisfactory answer for you. But I mean, Wargaming sort of announced that's how they're going to handle the captains. Just, yeah, any captain that you earn. When you earn the new captain, the old captain, I think, it's put into reserve, and you get the new 10-point captain in the ship.
Yeah, I mean, all right. Let's kind of move on, since we got a battleship theme going on tonight, and talk about something that it seems very obscure and a lot of people can't quite figure out what it means, and that's the leak news that the Alabama is somehow in the game somewhere in some format, right? Some leak stats.
It's coming.
You're putting your hat on it, huh?
I'm very excited about this. I feel like I have long complained about there being, first of all, no like premium US tier 8 ships, and the lack of high tier premium US battleships. We have the Arizona, which is nice, but it's like that slow standard design battleship. I wanted a higher tier, faster US battleship, and it looks like it's finally coming. Finally getting the South Dakota class.
Well, do you think it really fits in at 8? Is that, or instead of 9?
I mean, if you look at the stats, I mean, it's basically just like the sort of the in-between ship, so to speak, between the NC and the Iowa, which is historically, accurate. And everything from I'm seeing on paper so far seems to suggest it's pretty much in the same vein as existing U.S. battleships, and I just don't see any particular reason why I would not enjoy it. I mean, it's got better maneuverability. It's only sort of downside I can see so far is that it's got like 2,700 less hit points, which is like I can live with that. That's whatever, and the AA is slightly tweaked, but I mean otherwise the ship is pretty much just like a more maneuverable NC. And I mean if they get the armor values right, it should be even more survivable than the NC, because the South Dakota class's armor scheming was better than the NC's.
Well, let's get verification of that. Whiskey.
So yeah, in fact, the Iowa class was just a lengthening and an increase in the total machinery on the South Dakotas, as well as the switch to the 50 caliber, 16-inch 50 caliber length guns. And so there's a lot of similarities between the South Dakotas and the Iowas in terms of the armor profile layout. And if that's anything to keep in mind, I fully expect Wargaming to shaft us out of very large amounts of armor in the form of STS steel, but that's a discussion for a different time.
All right.
Well, I mean, the real question is whether or not they sort of work with the North Carolina Citadel scheme or with the Iowa Citadel scheme, because that will make a pretty huge difference.
Which one do you prefer?
The NC's Citadel scheme? Is that even a real question?
I just want to make sure, for the record.
Okay, for the record, I hope they go with the NC's Citadel scheme, because it's a lot harder to pen an NC at closer ranges than it is for like an Iowa.
Well, and the crazy part about that too is if you think about what separates the two, it in real life, the Citadel, the actual machinery space was at the waterline for both of them. The difference is that there's a splinter deck underneath the main armored deck. And Wargaming has chosen on the Iowa and the Montana to include the space between that splinter deck and the main armored deck as part of the Citadel space, whereas on the NC, for, quote, balance reasons, they've ignored it. And in reality, there's nothing there. It's an empty space. I mean, it's the armor scheme, it's like 0.65 inches of STS steel that separates that splinter deck from the machinery space and the deck above it. And so it's not like there's a whole lot of armor there. So I don't understand why they've chosen to do that. I think the Iowa survivability issues are plenty bad. But with regards to the South Dakota, I also hope they go with the NC route with it, simply because the Iowa is really squishy at anything but nose on.
Pretty much. I mean, that's sort of like a problem that a lot of people have noticed. And I mean, it's really if you just compare the two armor models, like it's just stands out right at you. Like there's like this huge amount of extra deck space on the Iowa that's being classified as a Citadel, and it just means you just get cut through like a hot knife through butter. A lot of times you're taking like shell fire. Not to mention, evidently, I read this in a thread talking about the Alabama on the Reddit this week, but a Redditor pointed out that Wargaming's armor. Their model for armor and dealing with ballistics, it doesn't quite capture the decapping mechanic of that drives a lot of the design of the U.S. battleships. And so because of the lack of that decapping action, U.S. battleships as a whole suffer in terms of how much protection they get from their armor.
Sure, and there's a lot of really good speculation as to the actual thicknesses, and one of the most commonly cited articles on that is an article on NavWeps from Nathan Oken, who is an expert in the field, for lack of a better phrase, where he talks about the 1.5 inches of STS steel on the outer hull of the Iowas over top of that inclined internal belt, and had just what kind of shells it could decap. His initial report on it says something to the effect of like up to 17 inches it would successfully decap the armor-piercing cap on the end of the armor-piercing shell. And then later he goes back and he publishes a different article correcting the original article, so it's like 10.4 inches or something like that. So, and I've actually tested this in a training room before. If you actually hit the section right at the waterline with AP, a lot of your shells, even at very close ranges in most cruisers, will break. The thing is currently in the game, if you go and look at it, Vermi, maybe you can pull it up on the Iowa, it's labeled as torpedo bulges. It should be 38 millimeters, which is 1.5 inches. It's currently listed as 25. And I don't know why that is. And it's one of the things that I tried correcting them on long ago and have since given up on.
Well,
I think
speaking
that's literally just the missing STS belt, isn't it?
Well, if you look at the section above it, you'll have to put all the armor schemes back on. You'll see it says 38 where it says armor right near the edge of the deck. But then you scroll down to where it says torpedo bulge and it says 25. Well, there's no difference there on the real Iowa. It's 38 from there all the way down to the bottom of the waterline. So it's not that it's missing STS steel there. The STS steel is actually missing from the inclined belt on the inside, on the back.
Well, then that brings us to a little speculation, right? So you take a look at the torpedo protection on the Iowa, and it's what, 27% here?
Mm-hmm.
21% on the North Cal, and then the leak says what, 51%
51
on the Alabama. So do you think they're going to take into account, that stuff we just discussed?
They might be, I don't know, but I'm a little frustrated by that number simply because of the fact that the TDS, the torpedo defense system for both the Iowa and the South Dakotas, were almost identical. I mean, we're talking about the South Dakotas and the Iowas sharing almost the exact same armor profile. The TDS was laid out exactly the same, and there's no real improvements made there. So why all of a sudden does the South Dakota have a 51% TDS where the Iowa has a 27%? And I'm sure the issue there is game balance, but there's really, I mean, it doesn't feel right from the historical aspect of it because there's no difference between the two.
So what do you think of the deck armor numbers there as well?
You're putting me on the spot a little bit here.
Good.
With regards to the
well, I can
South
pull it up
Dakota, it looks to be right. I mean, I think the way they did the deck armor is correct because all of the main armor plates on the Iowas, the South Dakotas, and the North Carolinas were backed up by STS steel. And whether or not you want to include that, I think the values that they put in game for the actual deck armor is the actual thickness of the actual deck armor, the Class B deck armor, without that STS backing plate. And we can go into a whole discussion about STS and whether or not it should be included or not, and whether or not other nations should also have theirs as well. But Wargaming's not consistent in their application of that. And I think that's part of the reason for my frustration, is that's part of the armor scheme. That was what gave the armor profiles of so many U.S. battleships such it was a solid design. It wasn't like it was the best. It also wasn't the worst. Italians.
Yeah, I mean, all I know right now is if you're in an Iowa, you do not want to get shot in the nose from the side, right? I don't know what
Correct.
it is about that. It just feels like you're going to give up.
I mean, you'd
else.
honestly prefer not to get shot at, period.
Well, yeah, no kidding. Thanks. Welcome to the game, Spectre.
Right.
But I just mean if you shoot them in front of the gun, and I know there's some weird things where if you shoot them in front of the number one turret, at least visually in the game, it looks like you're shooting it there, but you're still getting big Citadel hits.
Yeah, so what's actually happening there is there's a narrow range. It's 24 degrees from the line of travel of an Iowa. If you are closer to perpendicular, so if you're 24 degrees closer to perpendicular than you are in line with it, any shots that you put right underneath the number one turret are going to result in a Citadel hit. And that's because that front bulkhead thickness isn't very thick, and the bow armor isn't enough to prevent the shot from going through. Now, if you're a Yamato, you're going to lol pen it anyway through the nose, so it doesn't matter what angle you shoot at it with the Yamato. But for instance, if you were in a nose fight with another Iowa, as soon as you hit that magical 24-degree mark, you can lol pen another Iowa because you're not bouncing your 16-inch shells off of that hull plating. Anything shallower than that, and it's going to pretty much always automatically bounce, and then you won't get that Citadel hit.
Well, I think looking at it overall, I think the biggest surprise is while there's a 2 millimeter difference, 6 millimeter difference in some of the Citadel and deck armor stuff, right? Is the 51% torpedo protection, and so I mean that's what Yamato level torpedo protection.
Yeah,
And
that's a lot.
That's a super big deal.
I'll fucking take it. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I agree with Whiskey that I wish they would port that over like to the Iowa because like the two ships share a very similar armor scheme that extends to the TDS, and some people have on Reddit have also mentioned that how Wargaming calculates the torpedo damage reduction is also based on some loose formula based on what kind of TDS that ship in particular employed. But I guess like the main contributing factor is how much steel is calculated to be between the torpedo bulges and like the engine spaces. And if that is how it's done, then the Iowa should share in that that high percentage in torpedo damage reduction. But I feel like Wargaming, in the past someone has asked Wargaming about like earlier we mentioned the discrepancy in the size of the Citadel on the North Carolina and the Iowa. They went back, they looked at it, they said that, yeah, we agree. Historically, the Iowa Citadel should not have that huge section sitting above the water. But they also mentioned that, statistically, the Iowa is currently performing on par, and, if they, like, buffed it that by removing the Citadel, the numbers may, like, get thrown off. So, there you go.
I do have to bring up a very funny point that you bring that up that I was doing on par with. So the recent 2-week stats for all 4 of the servers for U.S. battleships and all the other battleships at Tier 9 indicate that the Izumo is performing slightly ahead of the Iowa. Now, the funny part of that is the Izumo is widely considered to be one of the worst battleships in the entire Japanese line, certainly at the high tier. So if the U.S.'s supposed best battleship ever made in the world for the United States is comparable to the worst high-tier Japanese battleship, that's kind of a sad state of affairs.
So you're saying the last 2 weeks for what?
I feel like the
battleships?
Izumo's
Yeah, for the Tier 9 battleships.
The Izumo's poor reputation is largely a holdover from the days when it came out of beta and like it was horrible. But I feel like in a time since, Wargaming has repeatedly buffed the Izumo, specifically making its guns better. And I don't know if the Izumo still deserves its poor reputation that it used to have. The same applies, I think, to the Colorado. The Colorado used to just be a huge turd, but they've buffed the ship, and it's decent now.
Well, I mean, the Izumo guns getting the better guns on the, I think it's a stock hull now is what it is.
Yes,
made a huge difference. And so, I mean, armor wise, the Izumo's turns out after that to be a pretty good ship. I think it's interesting that the Iowa and the Izumo both have losing records, but maybe that's me. I know 2% there if you're checking out the WTR here. Is within the margin of error, right? But
I mean, if you look at that, the performance numbers are very close to each other. Like it's you can very easily.
So that's North America. I'd be curious.
Yeah,
see what it is on the Russian service, right? Yeah, that's all right. We got time, right? I'm just curious because I was looking at the Russian and the Asian servers today in light of our cruiser talk from last week for UK cruisers, and if you check out the stats for the high tier like 8, 9, and 10 British cruisers, they're doing better than all other ships essentially in any class. And so I mean that just further throws it into question, right? And so here, taking a look at the Russian server, it's about the same distribution, right? Frederick's still leading the way, so that's, take that for what it's worth.
Imagine that. Viable secondaries can make a very useful ship.
So I was talking to somebody today, maybe it was Land Warrior, I don't know, but he had me kind of curious. I might take it into a training room that, he's played a lot of German battleships and said that, if you do spec it while not as long range, that the U.S. secondaries are actually really good. And so I'd be curious to know, how good are they? And I think next week we'll make Spectre test it out, I think. He's swimming
Was
in
that
all those.
Land Warrior?
I guess we'll see.
You're swimming in all those doubloons from, your recent 2v2 victory. So.
Oh God, put that to rest.
No.
I mean, I think even if the secondaries were okay, it's like you still don't have the kind of throw weight that the Germans do. I mean, looking at Tier 8, it's 10 guns per side for the NC. On the Germans, it's 14 guns. I mean, it's the sheer volume of fire. I don't think is comparable there. I don't know. Not to mention, I feel like ever since the Germans came out, like it's just increasingly dangerous to take a U.S. ship like that close to like an enemy ship if you want to try to employ secondaries.
Yeah,
certainly,
I agree.
certainly. I wouldn't choose to do that, but it's an interesting use case, and I think I'll test it out once to kind of see what's going on. See if it's true.
I think where that came from is I don't know if Land Warrior read the same thread that I read or not, but the thread I was reading, somebody actually did a time to kill analysis against stationary destroyers in a training room, and the U.S. actually had the quicker time to kill, even faster than the Bismarck did, because he used the North Carolina, the Bismarck, and the Amagi for the test, and the Amagi had the lowest because of AT. And the U.S. actually had the. It was an interesting read. I was like, man, I kind of want to test that out, but doubloon shortages. I'm not good enough to win a 2v2 tournament.
Fair enough, man. Well, I don't know. We'll go check it out. So.
Either way, end of the story. End of the day, though. Really excited about the Alabama coming.
Yeah, I don't know. So let me ask you this, Spectre. What would you be willing to pay for it? What's your price point?
I would hope it's in line with what the Turpus was on for, right?
Not hoping. What would you, the self-proclaimed Iowa player, be willing to pay for it?
Around 40.
Whatever. I bet you pay $70 for it.
Oh, rotten hell! I mean,
you would though.
Maybe for the bundle.
You would
maybe
though,
for the
right?
bundle. Maybe for the bundle. I mean, I don't know. It's this news comes at such a critical juncture, right? Because for me, at least, I know that the Grafspee is coming. I'm thinking about picking up, maybe the Loyang or Dunkirk. Although, in light of this news, it's probably not going to happen. But there's also the Missouri coming, which is going to require a ludicrous amount of doubloons to convert to free XP for. And then, of course, now the Alabama is now coming over the horizon.
Just use the ones from your $400 bundle last week, right?
Well, I wish I had that amount of spare money lying around to have gotten the bundle, but I didn't. So I unfortunately remain a poor.
Well, do you have the Loyang? Anyone here have the Loyang?
Nope.
Man, I didn't buy it the first time around, but after this last rank season, I was really tempted to buy it. But then, if you look at the patch notes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, the German DDs hit. So I'm asking myself, is it really worth buying with the German DDs and what we think is Hydro on them coming out?
I mean, that's gonna boil down to like how well like the German shells on the DDs perform, right? Because I mean, with US DDs, I mean, I don't know. Like, it's such a pain trying to hit another moving DD past like 8 kilometers on a US destroyer or a destroyer with US guns like the Loyang. And it's just, if German DD's guns have flatter arcs and acceptable performance in terms of reload, rotation speed, and damage dealt, then yeah, I mean, by the time you get to tier 8, I imagine there will be no reason to use a Loyang for its Hydro, because the German boat will have, again, this is speculation, the German boat will have roughly on par, possibly better, deep guns. There's torpedoes. It looks like they're going to be usable. You can use them for stealth torping, and they're probably going to get equipped with German Hydro. Although I don't know. I don't know if they're going to give them German Hydro on the DDs as well. But either way, I mean, the Lo Ying's uniqueness of having Hydro is going to be diminished once that German DD line comes out. And that's a pretty huge hit for the Lo Ying, I think.
Yeah, but the Benson just feels like a great ship, right? I mean, between the Benson and the Fletcher, those are the two destroyers that I played, including closed beta, where I really felt like they handle and they act like destroyers. And so, I mean, as long as you're under 10k, the gun arc, while obnoxious, it's a one mouse scroll out and you're still good to go, right? I mean,
It's not, oh, I can't get my enemies on screen to shoot them. It's, I shoot them, my enemy sees me, shoots them, he taps either his W, A, S, or D key, and then like, okay, I'm just gonna miss unless I am able to perfectly predict what he does next.
oh, you don't do the walking grid fire on him?
I guess I don't. And even then, it's just like, I mean, the shells just take so long. Your enemies have so long to react, and or just throw off your aim. It's. I mean, I don't know. I know playing ranked, there are some people out there who are just amazing, and they've got it down pat, and they will land those shots on you. But I am not one of those people.
All right. Well, you might have talked me out of it, even though it is on sale for solo. Let's see what else came out this week before we talk patches. Actually, you know what? Before we talk patch notes, let's go on over to Whiskey's Gaming Lounge and have a drink, and let's talk about one of the subjects that really kept me, or I went up the US battleship line first, but I kind of wish I hadn't, even though it's the speed, right? Even the Japanese battleships at that tier they're very fast, they shoot very far. US battleships are so slow. If you choose the wrong direction, you're never going to get in the fight. Even the German battleships, while not as fast as the Japanese ones, like you don't feel like you're out of the match if you make a wrong turn.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things I sort of wrangled with. Whenever people ask, "Oh, what line should I go up first?" and especially if they narrow it down to which battleship line, and
Cheers, Whiskey.
Yeah. Once
Cheers.
once you've played any other line, or gotten to the high tiers, going back to sailing a battleship that can barely break 21 knots, it is a huge pain. Speed, I mean, it matters. It really does matter in this game. It's a difference between getting to the action in time, or getting there just as your team is getting wiped out and you're just next on the list. It's there. I don't know if enough people value speed enough to realize how much of a pain it is to sail around in a slow 21 knot battleship. But unfortunately, in this particular case, Wargaming's hands are sort of tied because there are very good historical reasons for why American battleships at that time were designed to only go 21 knots.
Yeah, this is one of those times we can accept that, yeah, I guess we just really have to eat that one because, it is what it is. And Whiskey's going to set it up for us here in a few minutes. But first, Whiskey, before the show, we were talking about your experiences with the Colorado gun changes because you hadn't played it since what'd you say, closed beta?
Open beta, yeah. So when they redid the wipe for after closed beta, when going into open beta, as soon as I got through the Colorado, it got sold, and I haven't played it since. Yesterday, I picked it up for the first time since then, so over a year now. And what a totally different ship it is today than it was then. Because I remember the days where you could be like 6 kilometers away from another broadside battleship, shoot, and miss all 8 rounds. In one game yesterday, I did 160,000 damage after having never played the ship for over a year. That's an incredible change. And the first thing I noticed right off the bat was the turret speed buff. Like, holy cow, much more fun to play. And I plan on playing more of it. Obviously, I got to redo it for my redo of the US battleship how to play videos. but I have a feeling it's going to stay and hang around in my port from now on, simply just because I had so much fun playing it in that one game. It was just like, this is a totally different ship from what it was when I did my how to play video on it so long ago.
Yeah, I mean the guns definitely make a huge difference now, and the accuracy that they got, and it feels like they pen more, and that's kind of like nostalgia memory because it happened so long ago. But when you did a how to play video on the Colorado, what did you say? I'm just curious.
I think I referenced No Zoop for You had a video on it, and it was just a video of the Colorado sinking, like repeatedly. So like it would randomly go, and then you'd see another Colorado sinking, and then he said, "Get used to seeing this screen because this is your level of frustration until you can grind out of tier 7." And I was like, man, that hits that like right on the head. This ship has zero utility outside of its anti-aircraft bubble, and even that really wasn't that impressive. And so there was a lot of references to treating it kind of like a Pensacola and using it as a support ship and taking shots at anything that kind of got within your magical range and pray that the RNG gods decided to bless you with a hit or two. And it was really quite frustrating to play. I think I played like 30 some odd games in it just to get the one gameplay footage video that I had for it. And I was so frustrated by the time I was done with it, I sold it again right away.
Yeah, that sounds pretty familiar, honestly. The AA buff did matter a lot. We played a lot of it in ranked battles in the last season. It looks like Spectre's playing it right now, if you can tell by his face.
No, I'm not. I'm not. What I will say is, yeah, a while ago, before the last rank season, actually, before we had that weird tier 7 rank season, I did feel the sudden urge to rebuy and just check it out again. And I mean, like we mentioned earlier in at the beginning of this show, yeah, the Colorado has received a number of buffs, and it is a much better ship now. It's like, yeah, if a lot of the Colorado's poor reputation stems from its time during open beta, where it was just a giant floating turd. It's a lot better now. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's amazing, but the last
Yeah,
rank season
why?
I played it with, like I rebought it, before the rank season, and I was thinking, oh, I might hold on to it this time just because I love playing battleships, I love playing US battleships, and I enjoy having lots of ships in my port. I can tell you right now, having rebought it and then played it through ranked, after I put it back down, I just haven't touched it since. There's still a number of flaws with the ship. I mean, again, it's still a lot better than what it was before, but
Why would you play it right
a
now?
good ship.
Why would you play it right now? You've got the Sharn horse.
Because
Can you imagine the Sharn
on
horse in
occasion,
a
because on
previous
occasion
ranked
I
battle?
just feel like hating myself and just cutting myself, and so
Well,
that's when I
well,
break
you
it out
have
and play
you've
it.
got Montanus for that.
Yeah, but the Montana's very expensive way of doing that.
Just buy the tier 10 camo and you'll be good.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, right, dude.
I don't know, maybe. Did
I'm
you
not
buy
blowing my winnings on a tier 10 camo for a god awful tier 10.
it? Come on. Did you buy it, Whiskey? Did you get the camo for the Montana?
Not for the Montana. The only one I have that camo on is the Hindenburg because it printed credits before and now it is just a full-fledged mint.
Nice. Well, I'm kind of looking forward to going back and playing the Montana because I haven't played it in so long. So it might be interesting. Looking at the tier matchups lately, it hasn't been so skewed lately. So I don't know. Could be interesting. Could have a place again, and I won't feel so bad about playing it. So we'll see how that works out. But in ranked, the last season that was sevens, I felt that the Colorado was very competitive with the Nagato, with the gun buff. So I mean, other than the speed, gun wise, it was very competitive.
Actually, I started off the season playing the Colorado, planning on using that to grind up to max rank, but at some point, like I just couldn't do it anymore. Like the ship was so slow, and I mean I know the Colorado generally has a reputation for being a very very tough, like it's built like a brick shit house of a ship, right? Like it's almost nigh impossible to Citadel, although it does happen. I don't know. In my rank experience against people who actually knew what they were doing, who were aiming based on what they knew about the ships, I mean I just felt like I was just taking just absurd amounts of damage, from any angle. And I know that, whether I'm on the receiving end or the giving end, the Colorado has proven to be remarkably squishier than I remember it being or thought it would be.
Well, you're
And
also fighting German battleships now, and nothing feels
even
as tough
then,
as those.
like the German Tier 7, it's it's a 15-inch gun. I mean, the Colorado should have the armor to withstand it, but in practice, like the armor simply doesn't hold up. In fact, that's interesting you bringing up a German battleship because the Colorado feels a lot like shooting at a German battleship. Like you sort of aim for center mass. You're not quite aiming for citadels, but because the ship is so heavily armored, just any hit you get into it is like a partial pen, and you just very regularly see like 6,000, 7,000 health points sheared off from every single battleship style, from every single conceivable angle, just because, your armor is just catching so much flack, and it's just, I don't know. I ultimately actually wound up switching over to Nagato just because I figured, if I'm going to be playing, a ship that I can't seem to survive in, I might as well play a ship that at least that has slightly more accurate guns and try to dish out some punishment before I die.
Well, we were supposed to have General Dort on the show tonight, and one of the things about rank and talk a little bit about rank battles, but preparing for the show, I took a look at the top 3 players ranking out by win rate, right? And we had the quiz show before, so it's kind of anticlimactic now. But it wasn't battleships, it wasn't destroyers, it was Shikakus. So I don't know. We'll get into a carrier show later. I think it's time to revisit, although there's been a lot about those lately. So let's get back to battleships and Whiskey. Is there anything you want to set up for us before we take a look at why the Colorado and every other U.S. battleship is so slow?
No, I don't think I have anything else to throw in beforehand. Maybe a little bit after.
All right, with that, let's take a look.
Hey guys, it's your Peacekeeper coming at you with a little bit of history as to why the Tier 4 through Tier 7 U.S. battleships only go 21 knots in-game. To understand why they only go 21 knots, we first need to understand exactly what U.S. naval design was during the early 1900s. In-game, the USS Wyoming, Arkansas, New York, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado all only go 21 knots. That spans Tier 4 to Tier 7. The Wyoming, Arkansas, New York, and Texas are frequently called standards, but they are not actually U.S. standard battleships. The U.S. standard battleships were, in order of their congressional-approved build dates, the Nevada and Oklahoma in 1912, Pennsylvania in 1913, Arizona in 1914, New Mexico, Mississippi in 1915, although the Idaho was also added. Those are all 3 New Mexico-class battleships. The Tennessee and California, which were Tennessee-class battleships, in 1916. 1917, the Colorado, Maryland, West Virginia, and a 4th was planned, the USS Washington, which was not completed due to not needing her, really. So why are they called standards anyway? Well, the term standard comes from the desire to maintain a uniform battle line during combat. The analysis of individual ships to their foreign counterparts would certainly yield that U.S. ships were inferior on paper. However, the U.S. Navy never intended for these ships to fight one-on-one. The observation of foreign Navy ships required a commander of a fleet to operate at the highest common speed for all of his ships while in combat. For the British, this was approximately 23 knots, and for the Japanese, this was approximately 22.5 knots during World War II. Failure to do that meant that engagements would happen against the fastest ships first as they got into combat first. By unifying the speeds and turning radiuses of the ship, they were able to operate as a single cohesive unit. The standard design nature required that all ships be constructed to a similar top speed, roughly 21 knots, and have roughly the same tactical diameter of 700 yards, as well as having 4 gun turrets and 2 fore, 2 aft, as well as having similar hull design and armor layouts. Furthermore, U.S. naval strategist and captain of the Union Navy during the Civil War, Alfred Thayer Mahan, whom the Mahan-class destroyers are named after, knew that the U.S. had no real need to continuously pursue an enemy, so top speed wasn't a real priority.
He knew that by continuously displacing an enemy from a position would eventually force that enemy to confront the US battleship line as they ran out of places to run to. And he knew that the US Navy was going to destroy them because they were this single cohesive unit that could concentrate all their firepower. This naval doctrine dominated US naval design through the early 1930s. So what were the standards and why were they chosen? Well, the most obvious two standards were the speed and tactical diameters. The tactical diameter is the diameter of the circle that a ship turns when making a 180-degree turn. Those being 21 knots and roughly 700 yards for the tactical diameter. The 21-knot top speed was chosen as the pre-standard battleships, that being the Wyoming and New York classes, were still very new when these ships were all authorized for construction. The Wyomings were commissioned in 1912. The New Yorks in 1914. So by the time the U.S. standards were actually in the sea, those ships were still very new, and the U.S. wanted and needed to use those ships still. And those ships were limited in their top speed of 21 knots. So that was just kind of the standard chosen so that those ships could operate with the fleet. They also had basically that same tactical diameter of 700 yards. There was also a standard gun configuration that was the 4 turrets, 2 fore, 2 aft on all of the U.S. standards, which is another reason why the Wyoming and New Yorks are not considered standards. Also, the standards all had the same relative armor scheme, that being the all-or-nothing scheme. More specifically, the all-or-nothing scheme only armored the vital portions of a ship, as opposed to armoring the whole of the ship. This allowed for heavier concentrations of armor over critical components due to imposed displacement restrictions by naval treaties at the time. The standards more or less all had the same belt thickness of 13.5 inches, and their deck thicknesses were all roughly 4.5 inches of combined deck thickness. The turret faces were all relatively similar with 18 inches of turret face armor. While the armor values of individual classes of ships in the standards was not exactly the same, the armor overwhelmingly hovered around those specific numbers. Relative hull design was also considered standardized. Only minor variations were made to the various standards based on the needs at the time. The New Mexicos introduced the first true clipper bow on a U.S. battleship. They also raised the secondary gun emplacements for drier shooting positions. The Tennessee class removed the hull-mounted casemate guns and moved them to the main deck. The Colorados took the New Mexico and Tennessees and took it to the more extreme, with a more extreme pronounced clipper bow, as well as even higher gun emplacements for the secondary guns. Furthermore, the single most important aspect of the standards came about from a uniform fire control system. The U.S. standards all operated with the Ford Mark I analog fire control computer, widely considered to be one of the best fire control computers ever designed. They also incorporated a gyroscopically stabilized vertical stable element. That allowed for more accurate gun training during heavier seas, as it kept the guns trained to the correct elevation as the ship pitched and rolled in the waves. This is akin to the gun training stabilization seen on many modern main battle tanks. Part of this system was also having the fire control directors located at equal heights, both fore and aft. This, of course, was removed during the 1920s and 1930 refits, and that was not actually kept during the refits. So how did the standards actually perform? Well, there's no real easy way to compare it because none of the U.S. standards saw any ideal combat condition that properly tested the design of the ships. In fact, the vast majority of these ships were only heavily damaged during the attack on Pearl Harbor. It is important to note that during the attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Navy was in a peacetime condition, and they were legitimately caught off guard by the attack. With that in mind, you can look at the results and kind of extrapolate some interesting data points. Of the 8 standards present at Pearl Harbor, only 2 were complete losses, the USS Arizona and the USS Oklahoma. All the other ships were heavily damaged during the attack, raised, and rebuilt, and continued to fight through World War II. Upon further examination of the USS Arizona and the USS Oklahoma, the Arizona was sunk when an armor-piercing bomb penetrated the deck armor and detonated the forward magazine. It is unknown to this day exactly what set off the magazine, although there is plenty of speculation around the reasons and why. It is unclear if that was a flaw in the U.S. standard design, or if it was some operational failure, but the common belief is that the black powder used to launch the catapult scout planes stored in proximity to the magazines actually caused the explosion. The USS Oklahoma was hit by 7 to 9 aerial torpedoes in rapid succession with an unprepared crew. The Oklahoma sank on her starboard side. After the attack, she was righted, cofferdams were built around her, the hull had the water pumped out, and the ship was made watertight again and floated to a dry dock for rebuilding. By the time 1944 rolled around, though, she wasn't rebuilt, and the decision was made to decommission her. Throughout the rest of the war, the Standards were the recipient of 13 direct kamikaze hits, and in each one of the cases, they remained on scene and in combat operating conditions and continued to fight without issues. Torpedo protection was considered excellent, especially after the rebuilds from Pearl Harbor. The USS Maryland, which was a Colorado class, suffered a single torpedo hit in June of 1944. She sailed back to Pearl Harbor for repair, was repaired, and was back in action by August of 1944. The HMS Resolution suffered a single torpedo hit in September of 1940 that left her drifting helplessly. Her repairs would take from September of 1940 until October of 1941. This torpedo hit at the widest part of the Resolution's torpedo bulge and ripped a 50-foot hole in the bulge and a 20-foot hole in the armor behind it. HMS Barham and HMS Royal Oak each suffered triple torpedo hits during the war. The former, the Barham, capsized, exploded, and sank due to those damages while in wartime conditions. The closest approximation to this is Oklahoma receiving 7 to 9 torpedoes and sinking during peacetime readiness levels. The Royal Oak suffered a similar fate to the Barham. She capsized and scap afloat due to 3 torpedo hits. In terms of speed as protection, speed did not save the HMS Resolution from her torpedo attack, although the tight tactical diameter of the U.S. Navy Standard certainly allowed them to dodge numerous torpedo attacks from Japanese aircraft in the Pacific theater. In terms of gunnery attacks, the USS Colorado suffered 22 medium-caliber hits off a Tinian from a shore battery. While holed several times and having small fires on her deck, the Colorado remained on station in combat condition, continuing to fire at Japanese targets on the island while it was repairing all the damage that it was taking. The Japanese ships in World War II did not fare nearly as well as the British and U.S. ships did. Congo-class battleship Hiei received a similar assault to the USS Colorado and was rendered completely combat ineffective. She would later be scuttled by the Japanese, as frequent air attacks threatened to sink her. Japanese battleship Fuso broke in half, capsized, and sank in battle-ready condition from just 2 torpedo hits. Oklahoma didn't begin to list at Pearl Harbor until the 3rd torpedo hit. That's due to proper design and watertight compartmentalization. Yamashiro, another Fuso-class battleship, took 4 torpedoes and sustained bombardment from 14-inch, 16-inch guns to sink. However, 1 torpedo knocked out 3 turrets. The USS Pennsylvania suffered a single aerial torpedo hit while anchored at Buckner Bay in Okinawa, and while heavy flooding occurred, the ship remained afloat and able to defend herself with her guns. Well-trained damage control parties were able to stop the flooding and get the ship ready to be moved to shallower waters for repair work in less than a day. So what does this mean for in-game relevance? Why do I care about all this history? While we may loathe the slow speed of the ships, there are considerable advantages to only going 21 knots and having that heavy armor profile that the Standards all had. The slower speeds give a captain ample time to judge the flow of a battle and decide whether or not he should change his tactics in response to the changing flow. While the slow speed prevents running away from a failed attack, the slower speed of getting into the engagement should allow an aware captain to remove himself to a better position prior to the battle going south on him. This also encourages development of what I consider to be the single most important skill a battleship captain could have. That's pre-planning engagements with attack and retreat routes, cover, while maximizing the number of broadside targets available to him. Furthermore, the armor scheme offers some very tough ships that benefit the most by armor angling, and the generous gun arcs allow them to engage while doing that. And of course, you've got plenty of armament fore and aft when pushing straight ahead and retreating stern to the enemy. The Standard's heavy deck armor also adequately resists long-range plunging fire that frequently results in citadel hits. That's certainly in contrast to the Germans and the Japanese, who suffer extensively from long-range plunging fire. The Standards also have an extremely good torpedo defense system, or TDS. This is in direct contrast to the North Carolina, Iowa, and Montana, which have weaker TDS systems in-game. So I hope you guys really enjoyed kind of the history aspect to it. Let me know what you guys think.
Dude, I don't know about you, but I feel like I need to go play some US low-tier battleships right now. How
Oh,
about
yeah?
you, Spectre?
Not at all.
Not at all. Come on, that didn't
I
get
mean,
you fired up?
Like that lesson. Like, I mean, there's nothing against what Whiskey, just made for us. I mean, it was great. It's
You're
incredibly
done. You're done.
educational.
I'm cutting you off.
Incredibly educational. But I mean, here's the thing. Alfred Thayer Mahan's naval doctrine simply does not apply in this game. At least not, in your average random game. Because, again, like what Whiskey said, the whole idea behind 21 Knots was that the battle group would arrive together, it would fight together, and it's just in a random game like that just simply doesn't happen, especially in a game where a American battleship can be expected to go spawn in the same team as like a Japanese battleship. Like it just throws that naval doctrine out of the window.
No,
So
I don't think
it's
so.
an
I think
explanation for why, but it's just in game it still does not translate.
I think you're overlooking a very, very key point there at the end, which is planning when and how and a slower speed lets you have a lot more time to think about it, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the problems that I ran into with when I switched to the North Carolina from the Colorado, especially during closed beta when I didn't have any concept of how the game actually worked. Is you're so used to 21 knots and that amount of time that it gives you to really look at the battlefield and go, okay, I no longer have to go to this point because there's no enemies there and we've already captured it, so I can redivert myself to this other point. Whereas you get 25, 28 knots, and by the time you've thought that, you're already at that point and you're out of position. So it's a really vital skill to learn, and that's the kind of the point that I tried to drive home there at the end, is that there is an advantage to only going 21 knots, even if it's frustrating as heck to be at the back of the line the whole time. You've got all of this time to really assess which targets are the actual vital targets to take out, and if there are none that you can reasonably take out, reposition yourself. That's really the key to it. And if you get shafted and your team bails on you once you're in the combat, well, tough luck, I guess. That's kind of what happens. But I see your point too, Spectre, and it's a good point. I think that there's a lot to be had there. And going back to something that we talked about earlier, that Spectre brought up earlier, when people are asking, what battleship line do I go down? Unequivocally, I will always tell them the US battleship line. It's not the best line, but it teaches you all the good habits that you need to know in order to use the other two lines to their maximum effectiveness. It allows you to know the field situational awareness to know what's going on in the flow of battle. They have enough armor on them to teach you proper angling, where they don't have so much armor that you can't be citadeled and be punished for when you do mess up, like the German battleships. You can get away with way too much in the German battleships, and it just sets you off wrong when you're trying to grind up, say, the US battleship line or the Japanese battleship line thereafter.
Yeah, I guess it is a double-edged sword, right? If you go up the German battleship line and you kind of get spoiled. Like, if you were coming to the game brand new, it'd be really tempting to tell someone, hey, go up the German battleship line, because no matter what you do, it's going to work out for you. But that can also set you up for failure when you transfer to other lines later, especially British cruisers.
Definitely.
I mean, I've always had conflicts about which battleship line is the right one to go first, and I think Whiskey makes a lot of good points about why you should take the U.S. battleship line. And I mean, I'm still not sure which line is the best, because yeah, you're right. Like, it's the U.S. battleship line is sort of like like that middle of the road. You got armor, you've got speed, you got turning radius, a lot of things that and you develop a lot of skills that are necessary to to play well in these ships as you sort of go up these other battleship lines.
Well, I mean,
but on the other hand, though, it's like if your battleships are eventually going to be up to 30 knots fast, like, why wouldn't you start with that now? And I mean, again, yes, 21 knots does let you sit and think for a bit, but at the same time, 21 knots also sometimes means that when you do think of what to do next, you can't act out on it because your ship is too slow, or even worse, you realize that my team is collapsing on this flank, they're all dead and dying. Well, by the time you may realize that and have turned the ship around, it may be too late for you. And the answer of, oh well, that sucks to be you, like that doesn't fucking cut it. Why do that when I can be in Iowa, get to the fight, make an impact to try to
Well, that's
make it
a
so that we
different
win on
argument.
that front, and if it fails, I can get away. It's
That's
just like
a different argument.
It's just, no, it's
Yeah,
not.
because you're talking high tier stuff, right? So keep it seven and down. Keep it 7 and down.
You say high tier stuff, but guess what? The USS New York in this game, tier 5 makes, I don't think even makes 21 knots, even upgraded. But you know what? The Japanese Congo, it does. It makes almost 30 knots. So you can have a late tier battleship speed at tier 5.
Yeah, but you wouldn't put a Congo up against, say, I don't know, what can it face? A New Mexico? You're not going to put it up against something like that, are you?
Well,
Or
first
even a Texas? Or even a Texas?
Fighting at Texas? I mean,
I
yeah,
don't
why
know,
not?
dude. I don't know. You could try. You can run really far, but I don't think you're going to outgun it.
Well, no shit, Sherlock. It's got more guns than
Well,
the
then what are
Congo.
you complaining about?
Because
if it can't win the fight?
a Congo at 30 knots can make it to an objective that a New York can't get to in time to make an impact. Like, okay, I mean, think about
Okay,
think
how
about
many
normal
Congos do you
think about
have
how a
go to
normal
the
battle
objective?
usually plays out, right? In an objective-based map, the destroyers and the cruisers usually are the first ones on the scene. And guess what? If you're the only battleship there, you can make a huge impact there. Because all of a sudden, the enemy's cruisers and enemy's destroyers can't get that much closer to you because you're bringing 14-inch guns to the fight. Meanwhile, the other guy's New York is barely getting out of spawn. So by the time he gets there, if you've done your job and you sunk the cruisers and your destroyers are seizing the point, now all of a sudden the New York comes in, and if he hasn't turned away already because he's like, okay, well, my team's getting wiped out over there, then he's just going to get destroyed because there's more ships shooting at him than there are shooting at you.
Dude, so I don't know what game you play, but I've never seen a Congo player get closer than like 18 kilometers. I think they use their speed to get way outside, and that's cool. I get it, but I understand.
Those are poor battleship players, and if that's the argument, then no ship is any good because a poor New York players, he's going to stay at his max range too. Like that,
Of like
that just
12K?
literally makes no sense.
Right.
It
Well,
does.
Of like 12K, that's like right on cap.
It's okay, dude.
No, so and there's a bit of a difference there too because you look at the roles that each one of the ships play, and let's go back to the time before the German battleships came out. The U.S. battleships all the way up to Tier 7 were what we would consider today a brawling battleship. Now, they didn't have the secondary power that the Germans have, but they were definitely the close-in, screw-you-up because you're too close to me style of fighting. The Japanese were kind of that long-range, I hesitate to call it sniper, but it's definitely support fire, meaning they're the ones that are playing the long-range game, the 15 to 20-plus kilometer ranges. And the U.S. battleships were all 15 and in. And that's borne out in their main battery firing ranges. I think the Wyoming and Arkansas is what, like 14-1? And so you have these different ranges that they engage. Now you throw in the German battleships, which excel at even closer ranges than the U.S. battleships do, and it kind of pushes those U.S. battleships into the mid-range support stuff, which is exactly where that 21 knots can get them. But I'm with Vermicelli here. I don't think I've ever seen a Congo pushing caps nearly like I've seen, a standard, a U.S. battleship below Tier 7 pushing to caps. And I think that's because U.S. battleships, we have to. You have 21 knots. If you don't get to the cap, man, it's kind of hard for your team to push up. But the nice part about it is you got so much armor and such good firepower and such good anti-aircraft. I say that kind of half tongue-in-cheek, but such good anti-aircraft that you're hard to get off the cap then at that point. Like, you just can't be bullied off the cap nearly as well. Now, the German battleships, they can push you off the caps pretty easily, but if there's no German battleship and all you're shooting at is other U.S. battleships or Japanese battleships, it's really difficult to get pushed off the cap by them.
Again, same thing with what Vermi said when he brought it up. You're talking about poor battleship play. Right, because yes, U.S. battleships were traditionally considered better brawlers, but let's face it, in general, as a battleship player, you don't want to be sniping, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you're a Japanese ship, an American ship, or a German ship. You generally want to get to like a certain sweet spot, and that sweet spot usually hovers, I think, around between 15 and 10 kilometers from your target. And it's just like, yeah, you're right. Like, if a lot of Congo players, they don't understand that, and so they
All right,
look
here's
at
the
their
challenge.
stat screen and they say, "Oh, hey, look, I can shoot out to 20 kilometers plus or whatever," and they're going to try and do that, but they're going to be less effective than a Congo player who knows what he's doing and he's going to push in.
Here it is, Spectre. So this week, you and I, we're going to play Tier 5. You're going to play Congo. I'm going to record it, and we're going to see if you're a good Battleship player or a poor Battleship player, and how close you get to cap.
Sure. Whatever, dude.
No, I mean, I understand. I'm with you.
I'm
I
not interested
just
in making this argument because it's. I mean,
it's-
you're literally saying, oh, the reason why this ship isn't getting better is because shitty players play it in a poor way. And
not
it's just like,
really.
no, that's
not
not
really.
even.
But you're
even
easy.
close.
You're easy to push the button.
Yeah, I guess.
All right, so yeah, I think it's still painful to go 21 knots, and while it requires a lot more planning and stuff, I think the Colorado is not in a super bad place. But
I will also remind you guys that on an Iowa, I can also just go half speed or 3/4 speed and basically make the same speed as a Colorado and give myself the same amount of time to sit around and think.
Yeah, but who does that though? I mean, outside of like certain players, the vast majority of players I see are full flank ahead, 33 knots straight into enemy torpedoes.
If you need that time to think, the option is there for you on the Iowa. It's not you're either going 0 or you're going 33 knots. You have the option of going slower, and it's just
there's speeds in between full flank and full stop or reverse.
as it turns
what?
out. Right?
that's
I
not
know,
true.
right?
That's not true.
This is madness.
That's not true. All right, so I'm gonna do a little game here where I'm gonna try and open a super container, which I don't have, right? So I still haven't done any other choice but the
Have you opened a super container the last 2 weeks? Because I feel like I have not.
I opened one for like 3,000 free XP, I think.
3,000. Damn, you got shafted, man.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, or maybe it wasn't the super container. It was one of those like pseudo. Here's your token. It's not a super container, but it's not 5 flags one.
Yeah, I had one of those too. I think it was actually a 3,000 free XP.
5 camo. Woo!
Glorious.
It is glorious. So we'll leave it at that. I think what we will do though is we'll wrap it up with talking some patch notes, if you're game for that.
Bring it on.
I mean, was there anything super interesting in the patch that you wanted to take a look at, Spectre?
No.
Well, that really kind of sums it all up. What about
I mean, perhaps maybe besides the new Japanese destroyers, but I know you're not too keen on that.
Oh, well, okay. So I think I may have adjusted my perspective on at least 2 of them this last week. Mostly through trial and error of a lot of pain. And one was the Shiratsu.
Shiratsu.
Yeah, I really suck at that. And it's the torpedo reload, right? We did kind of a clan battle and at tier 8, and we saw a bunch of those show up, and a lot of it had to do with the torpedo reload. And I mean, while the reload on them, I think it's like 4 seconds or something, or not 4 seconds, 4 minutes. 4 minutes on those, right? Or whatever between the time you get the reload cooldown back. I think it puts out 16 torpedoes at a time if they use that module, plus they also have smoke. It's a significant emotional event sometimes if you don't have a plan to deal with that. And so I don't know. Do you have it yet, Spectre?
I do not.
What about you, Whiskey? You play some Japanese destroyers. So that and the other tier 8 gunboat, right? The only actual gunboat they have.
The Kazuki.
Yeah. We had this argument the other night, so I'm not even going to try. But, I think all in all, it turns out that while they're not exactly what people expected, that they've been doing really well. And I think that torpedo reload module at some point, if I were to guess, we'll probably see a nerf at some point.
Yeah.
One thing I will say is the line is improved, but I will say, in retrospect, calling it like a gunboat line almost seems like a misnomer.
It
because
is. It totally is.
despite what they've changed to these ships, they are still horrible gunboats. Like you're it's not like, oh, I'm gonna take these ships and go toe to toe with like an equivalent U.S. or Russian DD. Maybe except for the Akizuki. But besides that one, the rest of the quote unquote gunboat line, like they still don't feel like good gunboats.
Yeah, I think the gunboat moniker is thrown around, and I think it's kind of maybe a mistranslation of the original intent. I get the feeling based on playing them that their role is to make them more gun focused than the torpedo line was. And I think in a lot of ways they've done that, although there's a number of people that have rightfully pointed out that the torpedo line ships have pretty solid guns too when you actually use them. And that's been a problem that I have railed on my YouTube channel forever about Japanese destroyer captains not using their guns and leaving out half their firepower. But, the interesting part about Shiratsuyu is the total number of torpedoes that can come out within a 10-second time frame. 16 torpedoes. That's a full Shimikaze. But unlike Shimikaze, you get that in 4 possible different targeting areas. So you can really shut down and make a huge wall of torpedoes, an even bigger wall of torpedoes than a Shimikaze could. And there's a lot of power in that. And I actually really enjoy Shiratsuyu. I have not had this much fun playing a Japanese destroyer since I first got Shimikaze and was able to just giggle at the amount of torpedoes it could throw downrange and the amount of damage it could do. Shiratsuyu is right next to it in the level of fun. It's crazy fun.
Well, I'll give it this, right? So not only does it do a greater volume, essentially, but it can make the fields denser and a lot harder to dodge. So where before, well-aimed torpedo strike you 1 or 2 if you're really aware and paying attention. I mean, it's really hard if they lay them right to dodge without taking a significant amount of damage.
Definitely. And like I said, you get 4 chances to get a good salvo to actually connect, and you can either set that up so you have 2 very dense fields or 3 dense fields or 4 just kind of dispersed ones for general area denial. I mean, it's a very useful skill, and I question heavily why Shiratsuyu has the 5-second torpedo reload versus Akatsuki on the other side, on the torpedo side at Tier 7, which would have made more sense to give the torpedo ship the better torpedo reload booster, but I'm not complaining.
No, that doesn't
I mean,
make
the
any
best
sense.
part of it all is that the torpedoes are like the same, right? Like they're 10 kilometers, they deal a ton of damage. It's not like, oh, you're throwing out inferior torpedoes. No, you're throwing out the exact same torpedoes as the torpedo boat line, but you just throw out more of them. And I mean, I even pointed out in like a QA that Q did earlier when the patch hit, and it's just like, yeah, it's just between the torpedoes and the torpedo reload module on the quote unquote gunboat and the layout of the guns between the 2 ships, the torpedo line ship I think has a superior gun layout too. It's got, 3 turrets of 2 barrels each, and the 2 rear barrels are super firing, so you can shoot them both at the same time on the target directly behind you. Whereas on the Shiratsuyu, it's 2 turrets with two guns and 1 random turret with 1 gun. But the 1 gun turret is like placed in a weird place so that you can't fire directly backwards. So you got to show like some broadside to bring it into play, and it just seems like the 2 ships could literally get swapped around, and it would make a lot more sense.
I'm with you.
Well, while we're talking about guns, and I think this is a little known, well, it's been a little less commented on patch note, is if you take a look at what they did to the Shimikaze shells and damage again for HE, and they reduced it by 14, reduced the damage by 14%, and the chance of fire has been reduced by 2%. And all they did was decrease the reload time from 7 to 6 seconds. I mean, that's just like, to me, that's salt in the wound. I'm not a Shimikaze player, and I don't anticipate ever being one. Maybe someday when they slow down the line release, but I mean, I don't know. What else do they want to do to Shimikazes at this point?
Well, I don't think it's changed a whole lot with the Shimikaze. The Shimikaze's big thing has always been, you've got all these torpedoes, put them to good use. Don't run the 20k torps unless that's all you have access to. But,
the gunplay on it was always excellent, and I think the quicker reload is actually going to end up being far more beneficial, even with the nerfed fire chance, simply because you can just put that many more rounds on target. And I've not done the calculations to figure out whether or not that is an actual buff or not, but I I don't see it as being necessary to having tweaked Shimikaze in any way except for possibly upward, even though I think she's more than capable as she is. And I I don't know. I have yet to play her since the release. I've been busy doing other things, so I've not had the opportunity to play her since the patch, but I imagine it's not going to change anything for me.
Well, Spectre, did you have the Fubuki before the patch hit?
I did, yes.
So, what did you think about the transition of all the stuff that they gave you for having the Fubuki? So you got the Kagero.
It's been largely. I mean, I feel like I touched upon this last week.
You
but
did.
Yeah, the way Wargaming handled this has been incredibly generous for the players. I mean, yeah, if you, yeah, there's any number of ways you could have gained how Wargaming handles transition to either get yourself more money or straight up get like a discounted tier 9, heavily discounted tier 9. So I'm very happy with the way they handled it.
How about you, Whiskey?
Yeah, I think Spectre's right on that. I think there was a group of us that kind of got shafted a little bit, but that got resolved and corrected. So that's not a big point to make anymore. But I think it ended up being very generous to the people who spent the time to actually grind up the line, and I think for the most part, I think everybody ended up on the positive side of that, as opposed to being kind of shortchanged by it. Where Wargaming could have certainly taken we're just swapping them direct for direct, and you guys can deal with the rest of it on your own, forcing people to regrind through ships. And I know there's some that have to anyway, with Hatsuharu being moved to the gunboat line, but I'm sure they'll get over it.
Huh, that's interesting.
I mean, even if you had a Hatsuharu, I mean, they gave you the tier 7 replacement for it. So it's like you didn't actually lose anything. It's just, yeah. I mean, I honestly, thinking back on what they did, I can't think of a situation where you made it lost progress, because I just felt like they handled it really well.
Yeah, I agree. They did really good with it.
So let's talk dynamic divisions a little bit, since we kind of knew it was coming, and we kind of speculated that maybe we would see more people in a battle trying to team up, and then I would assume use the in-game voice, and that you might see greater coordination or not. And I haven't really seen that play out in battle so much. I haven't seen like the whole team just div up and call it good. And one of the notes from this week, and I thought it was curious, and I haven't been able to look too deep into it, is the maximum number of divisions is 6 for random battles and 3 for co-op battles. I was just curious, out of that, what you guys really thought about that.
You said the max is 6?
Yeah, if you take a look at the patch notes here, the maximum number of divisions is 6 for a random battle. So I don't know if that means 3 aside, if that means, you could have 4 on one side, 2 on the other, if it's based on players, I don't really know, right? So maybe that has a lot to do with people trying to, you hop in a division with trying to create all those divisions in the battle real time, and then getting some sort of unified effort going.
Yeah, I don't know what direction what that's supposed to mean, but I have seen a number of people jump into the game, and right away you'll see a bunch of people. So and so has joined Division A. So and so has joined Division B. So and so has joined Division B. And I've seen it in just about every game I've played since the patch, where somebody's joined up in a dynamic division, and it I don't know about increasing teamwork per se, and I don't know if they're using voice chat or not, but it seems to have, at least people are using the feature, which I suppose is at least a step in the right direction. Is the next logical step is for them to utilize the in-game voice chat and actually have that activated, whereas I know most people don't even have it activated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely one of those that does not, but if there's somebody out there listening that really uses it a lot, I would love to hear, exactly what that is and what it's like for you, because Again, I mean, another one here is you can only create if you're within one division on each side, right? So you can't have a disparity in number of divisions. So you can't have 4 on one side and 1 on the other, it looks like. So I don't know. To me, I don't know if it's a limitation of the game or if it was a decision, a conscious decision to limit the number of teams you have in a battle so that solo queuers don't feel like they're left out. I don't know.
I mean, with dynamic divisions, if you're feeling left out, just join a division now, right?
Pretty
Not
much. That's
not
what
if
I
there's
got
only
out of it.
6, right?
I just don't know if that crops up often enough. But I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe that's something to test or something. It would be kind of silly though to have if it was 6 divisions between 2 teams, so 3 divisions a team, and then if that's the cap, you can't form a new division. That's just, especially if it's on the fly, like you didn't plan for this. Why would wargaming like stop people from doing that? But whatever.
Yeah, and I'm kind of shocked that you have to be within one of the opposing team's number of divisions. I would consider that kind of unnecessary, really. If one team wishes to have that level of organization and absolutely raffle stomp the other one, that should be the prerogative of that team, and it should be to the detriment of the team not doing it. That's just good teamwork, which is something I would hope Wargaming would actually desire to promote, especially since it doesn't seem to exist in most random matches.
Well, I mean, if it's limited to 6 total and you can't have more than a 1 disparity, I would just be curious to know what
I think that limit is for matchmaker and not in game.
Well, no, I mean the note there it says it's in game to be in line with matchmaker, right? I'd have to go back down and find it again for you. Man,
Well,
where'd it
even
go?
if it is, even if it is, that to me seems like that would be something on the back end that Wargaming could always fix. I mean, your maximum number of players in a random match is 12v12 anyway, so that would only be 4 divisions per team. So it's only 2
Well,
more
you're assuming
divisions
they
total.
max out, right? You're assuming you
Yeah.
max them out. But there it is, Spectre. That's the line. During battles, the dynamic division has only created the quantity, which is weird grammar, right? Of divisions on the opposing team doesn't differ by more than 1, which is a matchmaker condition. But it also
That
quantifies it there
translation
during
is
battles.
so mangled, I don't even know what to make of it.
Yeah, quite possibly. So
I mean, you could argue that they're basically trying to say, oh, dynamic divisions in terms of matchmaking will be treated exactly the same as regular divisions, which is say, oh, you're not gonna be able to use dynamic divisions somehow cheat the system and get it so that your team has more divs than they do.
yeah, exactly.
But whatever.
Yeah, so sounds like a gameplay choice more than it does a restriction in the game model. So I mean, the only other thing is that really came out was the campaigns, right? And I didn't think they would matter to me, but you know what? I find myself actually paying attention to them and trying to get those tasks accomplished. So, I'm not very far along, and I don't know about you guys, but it's going to be something I actually participate in to try and complete.
I'm surprised because the reward ship for the one campaign is the Shinonome, which is a Fubuki. It's a Japanese destroyer. I think that would be not something you would be interested in.
Yeah, but
There's still plenty of prizes in between.
Yeah, there's a lot of money, a lot of flags, a lot of camo, a lot of all that other stuff in there. Plus, it's free, so I'm always down with that. And I don't know. I've got like a Mikasa that I don't play ever. I don't even think I played it once, right? So don't let that get in the way of a good time.
There you go.
All right, gents. Well, I think that kind of wraps up this week's news. We hope Crazy's gonna join us next week. Hopefully, all is well with his family, and we'll look forward to seeing what you have for us next week, Whiskey. Spectre, I have to try to find something harder for you.
All right.
Or something more along his bias. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, so big carrier thing then, huh?
I don't know.
There we go.
We're not going to break out the Enterprise yet. That'll be on the list, I'm sure. So you can keep that in the back of your mind.
Fair enough.
I'm sure that's how it's going to roll. But I think we'll find something before that. Other than that, I think next week, 10 o'clock Central Time, We'll stream live on Twitch as well as put the video on YouTube and continue to put out the podcast as is. I think it's going to work out and be a good format. Obviously, any comments or critiques or feedback, or please come out and participate, is always welcome. And I think sometime, if this kicks off well, we're going to do a ship giveaway in the next couple of weeks. So we'll have to work out what those details are. And we'll make Spectre pay for it with this big bags of money.
Hell no. We're going to fucking raise your welfare check for that, Vermi.
My welfare check? Yeah, I guess I could do that, right?
So long as I'm not paying.
Fair enough, gents. All right. Well, thank you again, Whiskey, for coming out and participating with us. And we'll catch you guys all next week.
Thanks for having me again, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, see you.